It's 1960, and another tiny country in Southeast Asia is about to be used by the CIA to prevent the spread of communism. This time, it's lucky Laos. Now, Laos is tucked away between Thailand and Vietnam. Most people would find it impossible to point out its borders, a problem that they'd share with the CIA, who decided that Laos was the key to winning the war in Vietnam.
Laos had enormous strategic importance in the fight for Vietnam. The Vietnamese communists from the north had been using a secret trail which ran through Laos to direct troops, weapons and supplies to fight the US troops in the south of Vietnam. The Americans couldn't invade Laos, so the CIA was called in and ordered to take care of the problem. In the hill villages of North Laos, the CIA spooks made contact with the ancient Hmong tribe. 30,000 of these fierce tribesmen were paid, trained and signed up to fight for the CIA in this secret war in Laos. The tribesmen were happy to fight for the CIA so long as they were allowed to carry on farming and selling their local cash crop, opium. Opium and heroin had always been grown and produced in Laos, but the CIA made it much easier for the tribesmen. Not only did the CIA let them carry on producing heroin, they also made it much easier for them. They set up an airline, Air America, which was used to transport the drugs into neighboring countries, including Vietnam.
I was a freelance journalist. I went to Laos to do this story on the source of the heroin and opium that was flooding into South Vietnam. And I was interviewing opium farmers. How much did you produce last year? What did you do with it? And the answers were always the same. We got about 5, maybe 10 kilos. At the end of harvest, we went down to that landing pad. An American helicopter came in, paid us cash for the opium, loaded the opium on the helicopter and flew away.
The trail of drugs follows the trail of clandestine operations. And there's a very good reason for that. If you're carrying out clandestine operations, you need black money, and you need cooperation from criminals. All right. When you put together black money, untraceable money, and criminals, what does it add up to? Narco-trafficking.
CIA headquarters had no idea what was going on the ground in Laos. Their agents in Laos had to keep the local drug traffickers happy in return for their support. So the CIA got their secret army by turning a blind eye to the heroin trade. But what the CIA hadn't thought about was where this heroin was headed.
Well, it's what I call mission myopia, turning a blind eye, if you will. It was their troops, their aircraft, and they knew about it at the time. So the CIA was a part of that, and they were moral in that sense. They were loyal to their fighters. But they didn't worry about the fallout, what happened downstream. That was somebody else's business.
A huge quantity of the heroin produced by the tribesmen was delivered straight into the hands of the American GIs stationed in Vietnam.
In 1969, we adopted a defensive posture. The troops became demoralized. They were basically confined to fire bases in defensive positions, and time was very heavy on their hand. And the way to make 365 days just go blip and disappear was heroin. And the stuff was cheap. It was sold in every bar, every fire base, little tiny screw cap plastic vials, about $2 a piece. And it was 96% pure heroin. You didn't inject this stuff. You scooped it out and you snorted it. The White House did a survey after the Vietnam War, and they discovered that in 1971, 1/3 of all U.S. combat forces fighting in Vietnam were heroin addicts. If you do the calculus, okay, there were about 70,000 heroin addicts in the United States. in 1969. By 1971, there were 80,000 heroin addicts in the U.S. Army fighting in South Vietnam. That means there were probably more American heroin addicts inside the U.S. Army in South Vietnam than there were in the United States.